survey and inventory efforts. A lot more needs to be done. It should include an examination of the neighborhoods. Thank you.
My name is Velma Henry. I've lived in the Odella Brighton neighborhood for over 50 years. And when I moved there were no sidewalks, no paved streets, but we moved there because of the space where our children could grow up and be safe and have a place to play outdoors instead of crowded apartments. And that was back in the day, but now we are a modern neighborhood. We are changing rapidly. Sometimes I think it might be too rapid, but we are changing. We are a compact neighborhood. We've had a change with the light rail, which was scheduled to go down Rainier Avenue, changed to Martin Luther King, and we fought to have it put underground, but the decision was to put it at ground level. As many of you have read in the paper and saw in the news, that there have been many accidents with many loss of life since the light rail has come to down MLK. And now we come to the Upzone. There are many of us older citizens who have worked to make this a good community where we can live, raise our families, and our grandchildren can play outside in safety. And we come to the Upzone, and there is a chance that our property will be taken away. We will be displaced. So we think at this point of time, this is progress, and we agree with progress. We'll call a diverse neighborhood, and this is good also. Of the three plans you have presented, 1, 2, and 2 have a great high risk of many displacements. So at this time, I would ask you to consider taking the Odella neighborhood to the least displacement alternative, which is alternative 3. Thank you for your attention and listening to this matter.
Thank you, Myra Gouda.
I believe this hearing is happening because the SEPA rules require it. Notice who is no longer here, neither the SEPA responsible official, I don't believe he left, nor any of the council have bothered to show up and listen, right? So for those few people in the future listening to the recording of this or looking at a transcript, hello! The June 8th, 2017 DEIS for the MHA Citywide Urban Village Upzones is not an impartial discussion of environmental impacts. The premise underlying the city's proposed action is false. That giving the development interests a large gift of increased development capacity in exchange for a relative pittance for construction of subsidized housing in different neighborhoods will provide a net increase in affordable housing. The DEIS has not adequately supported how it will actually improve the housing affordability situation for middle-income people in Seattle. That's not even getting to the impacts on livability.
Yeah.
Extensive community engagement was not used to inform the DEIS. Neighborhood planning was abandoned for a focus group process with all city selected participants. Focus groups cannot possibly provide the neighborhood specific input required for authentic community engagement required by the GMA and the impact analysis required by SEPA. Despite repeated requests of the focus groups from many people, the problems caused by the 2010 shift from unit count limits to FAR in the low-rise multifamily zone has not been corrected. The impacts of the baseline condition are not stated, and neither of the two alternatives includes a significant fix. The DEIS analysis of impacts is deficient in numerous areas, more subject areas than I can get on in 2 minutes, in 5 seconds, or 3 more weeks. So we need an extension, please, and I request that every comment be printed in full and that you include specific comments to each responses to each comment.
Yeah.
Myri, followed by Julia Prosciutto.
Hello, my name is Mayani Guetta, and I'm here representing Puget Sound Sage. Sage has spent upwards of 10 years working to win inclusionary zoning programs like MHA, and in principle supports MHA. And we also believe that we won't truly solve our housing crisis unless we both center outcomes on displacement and ensure that communities most impacted by displacement are actually the ones driving the policy solutions. So communities of color and low-income communities. We organize the South Core Coalition, which is comprised of over 20 community groups in the Rainier Valley, organizing for a shared vision of community-controlled and inspired development. And since 2013, South Core has worked to ensure that land use policies and public investment directly benefit communities of color and low-income communities. We have seen that the impact of speculative real estate due to the light rail investment in the Rainier Valley has disproportionately displaced communities of color, which is why we're quite dismayed by the draft DEIS's failure to recognize the full impact, the in fact very much racialized impact of displacement, and therefore on a fundamental level, any conclusion based on the document's current analysis will certainly further uphold systemic and institutionalized racism. As a multi-issue organization, we draw the connections between displacement, good jobs, and climate change resiliency. We are also deeply concerned about the lack of analysis of the impacts of the draft DEIS on cultural displacement. Cultural institutions play a vital role for a community in crisis, whether it's a climate event, community trauma, or an economic crisis. These institutions serve as the glue that help communities thrive in place. So without fully documenting the potential for cultural displacement, this analysis fails to fully account for the displacement impacts of the proposed plan. Please look out for a letter from Puget Sound Sage and South Core detailing our analysis and feedback on the DEIS. We hope you'll consider the critical racial equity pieces that are currently missing from the document. Thank you.
You're here.
Julia, followed by Amanda Sawyer.
Good evening, my name is Julia Prosciutto, and I'm also here representing Puget Sound Sage. Like Manny said, we worked over the last year to help pass a mandatory housing program in Seattle as a tool to capture the value of increased property values and growth. We're still working on our analysis of the DEIS alongside our community partners, but we already recognize several key gaps in the analysis, one of which Miami spoke to. We believe that limiting growth in areas of high displacement risk does not in and of itself mitigate displacement risk. Over the course of the last year, we've repeatedly provided requested feedback to OPCD on how to incorporate an anti-displacement framework into the MHA rezones, the citywide rezones, but the EIS doesn't reflect this feedback. We believe that a growth framework that says either we do grow places with high displacement risk or we don't is too limited. Communities of color and low-income communities deserve to be invested in as long as it's not at their own expense. We urge OPCD to expand Alternative 3 or create a new alternative that triggers other levers. What would it look like to expand the rezone boundaries but limit height increases? What would it look like to increase the percentages marginally in neighborhoods with high displacement risk? We'll be sending a letter and hope to be talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Amanda, followed by Susan Ward.
Hi, I'm Amanda Sawyer from West Seattle Junction Juneau Association. I also support an extended comment period for the draft and final DEIS. I feel each section leads you down a rabbit hole of comp plans and regulations. I'm learning way more than I ever thought I would. I also believe that having 20 plus urban villages evaluated in a single draft EIS is not sufficient, a one-size-fits-all solution for each unique urban village with their unique issues and traffic, topography, makeup. One-size-fits-all isn't the right approach. I'd also like to point out that mitigation often doesn't seem achievable or even based in reality. For example, design review in the land use section is noted as a tool for mitigation, and design review process is being changed to exclude a lot of LR projects from design review. or community input. So that is a mitigation tool for the community isn't relevant. Open space mitigation is to ask developers to impose impact fees, asking them to put public open spaces in their development projects. And these are the same developers that don't have enough money to provide more than 2 or 7 or 9% of affordable units. So I don't think that that's really plausible. They're going to put a public open space in their projects. And affordable units in our urban villages touted throughout mitigation, and there's no guarantee that affordable units will remain in the urban village, and to me that isn't a community. Please do look at individual urban villages and their unique issues. Please come up with real mitigation solutions. After all, real people live in these urban villages, not hypothetical ones.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Susan Ward, followed by Jennifer Scarlett.
The draft DEIS acknowledges that among the changes proposed, upzoning single-family residence streets to low-rise 2 would have the, quote, most severe impacts. However, a few pages later, it finds that the impact on the one and only street in the Northgate Urban Village that is in this situation would only be moderate. That's the street we live on. There is nothing moderate about upzoning one side of a residential street to LR2. The population would increase 400%. There's no room for even 12 more vehicles to park, and traffic and parking problems on this narrow street would increase exponentially. But no data appear in the EIS for street parking in the Northgate Urban Village. Most of the residents on the upzone side of my street are renters, and all would should likely be displaced because their affordable housing would disappear. Over half of these renters are people of color. One of MHA's guiding principles is to provide transitions between vastly different sizes and uses of building. Currently, our street provides this transition. Both sides of the street are houses with yards. Directly behind us to the east are low-rise and high-rise apartment buildings and condos, with commercial buildings east of them. Between these multiplex buildings and the single-family houses are backyards, a green belt of trees and green space. This transition would be destroyed by rezoning. Instead, 40-foot-high, 4-story boxes would completely fill lots, facing and alongside houses. The effect is neither gradual nor moderate. It would be abrupt and severe. The EIS says a possible mitigation method is to amend zoning regulations in urban villages to explicitly address transitions to surrounding areas, particularly single-family residential areas adjacent to urban village boundaries. Amend the EIS to reflect the severity of changes proposed to streets like mine, half on the inside edge of the urban village and half outside. The eastern half of 103rd to 105th Waterford North should not be rezoned low-rise. Keep it single-family housing or zone a residential small lot, just as Howell did for a street on the northeast edge of Northgate. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Jennifer, followed by Penny Coking.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Scarlett. I own a house in South Park, and we've never gotten notice that we're being rezoned in our neighborhood, and we've never had a meeting from HALA in our neighborhood. We've organized ourselves. I only found out 5 months ago this was happening from a neighbor, and then a lot of people found out from me. The Hispanic community is having a meeting tonight to organize about this because they just found out. And we need to extend the comment period on the EIS because they don't know and they have the right to give input. I think it's very important. I have an issue with the study used to gauge displacement that uses the Tenants Relocation Assistance Ordinance. A lot of people do not qualify for that. And they are being displaced and they're not going on record. So using those numbers is not adequate. We need a better study. The study on apartment buildings adding affordability of apartment buildings over 20 units doesn't apply to South Park. We don't have any apartment buildings that big in our neighborhood. Design review won't, low-rise 1 and low-rise 2 won't qualify for design review, and that's the main mitigating factor in the EIS, and it will no longer qualify after the amendments. So I also feel like any proposed mitigating factors need to be removed from the final EIS because if it's proposed, that's not a reality, that's a dream. It needs to be rule of law when this happens, when it's voted on. I would also like to know know why I will have 11% MHA requirement on my property in South Park when South Lake Union has a 2% MHA.
Ooh, good question.
The action alternatives are too similar. I think they're the same. There needs to be an action alternative that does not include an actual upzone, possibly a real estate investor's tax to reduce speculation.
Followed by Daz Oberg.
Hello, this is Penny talking from South Park. Listen. I live in South Park and I'm standing there because my home is there. I am also the president of the Duwamish Valley Neighborhood Preservation Coalition, which is a nonprofit organization formed in 1992 to protect the neighborhoods along the Duwamish River. Oops, sorry, can you stop that clock for a second?
We'll let you go for a few extra seconds.
So we also have standing, if there is any possible legal action later. I want to talk about the EIS, the environmental part of the EIS. And I also want to talk to you about South Park and what has happened in South Park. We have not grown as other neighborhoods have because of our environmental impacts there. We are surrounded by industrial toxicity and we have lost lots of homes. Therefore, we have lost population there. So we really shouldn't be planned for. And the problem is that we are going to be losing our single-family zoning with this proposal. And that, strangely enough, as you people should know, is what has protected us all these years. And we fought hard to keep our single-family zoning there. And that is why we have yards and trees and mitigating things to keep the Duwamish Valley cleaner. This is a Superfund site. It's a critical area. It's a historical neighborhood. It was the first town on the river. So I really think you should relook at what you're doing to South Park. And we choose alternative one, which is not to do anything at all.
Okay, thank you. Daz followed by Andrew Kirsch. I think it's Daz Oberg. The last name is clearly Oberg. I have trouble first though. Okay, let's go on to Andrew Kirsch, followed by Ron Lamoda.
Good evening. My comments are about the tree canopy calculations.
Can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Sorry, is that better? So my comments are going to be about the tree canopy calculations in the biological resource section. So currently it's a city goal to preserve and increase tree canopy in the city. There are a number of what I think are clearly false assumptions made in the DEIS that affect their assessment of what the impact of how it will be on tree canopy laws. So first of all, there's an explicit assumption that tree canopy in zones that are not upzoned will remain the same. The zone that provides the most tree canopy is private property zones in the city is single-family residential. Elsewhere in the DEIS, it's stated that about 30% of demolitions in Seattle are now in single-family zones, because these are generally projects where a very large house replaces a small house. You have permanent removal of potential canopy replacement space. Second, the low-rise canopy where all the canopy zone calculations for existing canopy were made using LiDAR and their averages over entire zones, okay? This is highly misleading. So I live on Capitol Hill. The low-rise zone on Capitol Hill still consists to a very significant percentage of single-family houses that provide a lot of tree canopy. So if you calculate, if you use that low-rise zone as representative low-rise canopy, it's obviously an overestimation because there's a very significant single-family component there and all the trees that come with it. Another assumption that's made is that old low-rise development, as you see on Capitol Hill, which consists of apartment buildings that have setbacks that are large enough to contain significant trees, or courtyards that contain trees, are representative of current and future low-rise development, and that is not true at all. So we now have row houses on Capitol Hill, which provide very little setback, not enough for significant trees, and obviously no space in between.
Thank you, Andrew. Ron Moda, followed by Deborah Zlagash.
My name is Ron Mamoda. I'm very concerned about the proposed rezones and the impacts that they will have citywide. I feel, however, Alternative 3 can best address these concerns. This is because it specifically looks at Alternative 3, specifically takes into account a number of risk factors citywide, and the risk of displacement is one of the bases for lowering the zoning at a site. I live at the Othello Urban Village, and the risk for displacement has been determined to be very high. And this applies to me as well. I am very likely to be displaced. The largely immigrant community would be the hardest hit because homes at Othello are already valued far less than any other parts of the city. So they will have no other place that they can go, they can afford to go. This includes also lower incomes, non-English speaking skills, less education will mean making it anywhere else an extreme hardship. I do agree with, again, Alternative 3, that does recommend, because of the risk for displacement, downsizing the expansion area. The MHA suggests LR1, and the Alternative 3 reduces it to RSL. The expansion was further east of 46, but according to Alternative 3, it's limited at 46. Also on 44th, the RSL goes 1/2 block west. I strongly encourage the city to select Alternative 3 as a preferred alternative. I appreciate the city's efforts to reduce the risk for displacement in determining how zoning is to be applied. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Deborah, followed by AJ Honore.
So my comment is also about the tree canopy. There are a lot of assumptions going into the estimates for tree canopy loss that just seem very implausible to me. For instance, for Alternative 2 in the DEIS, the study says that when single-family home housing is rezoned to low-rise, that the tree canopy cover will only decrease by 2 percentage points. So it says that single-family homes tend to have 25% canopy cover, and low-rise tends to have 23, so it's only decreasing by 2. This is not how it's going to be. When I see low-rise built around the city, obviously, usually the buildings use up most of the lot space. They use basically the space they're allowed to, and there really is not room for any large tree to be planted around these buildings. So, because of this, the tree canopy is going to decrease a lot more than the environmental statement says that it will. And so I think the estimates just are incorrect. I know they're based on the LiDAR, like the other gentleman said.
They're based on what's
Not used to microphones. They're based on LiDAR, where they're looking from above and sort of estimating.
from by satellite data or plane data. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's just assuming way more tree canopy for the larger buildings than is actually going to happen, which is a problem. So that's all.
Followed by Tim Trahomovich.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is AJ Honore from District 7 here in Seattle, Washington, USA. Thanks everybody for coming. I'd like to reiterate a few points. One is we need more time to discuss this. It seems like this whole timeline is something of a foregone conclusion. And one thing that I'm sitting here listening to folks, I'm hearing a lot of pissed off people. I don't know, put words in your mouth. But the more I learn personally about the so-called grand bargain, the more pissed off I get. Grand giveaway is what I hear when somebody says, especially an official or somebody who works for the city, the grand bargain. I think, oh, no. The grand giveaway, if you please. Here's the question, where are our officials? Somebody said that before. I mean, we've got some city employees here, but I don't see the mayor. I don't see anybody from districts 1 through 9 here. Maybe they're hiding in the back because they're afraid of Alex. No, he's not here anymore. So with regard to the environment, we've had some comments about the tree cover. Clearly, the 25 to 23% change, that's garbage. That's a lie. We all know that. Development is inherently anti-environment. If you're looking at the environment as something that we'd like to, not pollute. Some of us live on Superfund sites. For instance, there's a market rate development going up where I live in Belltown. It sits atop what would be classified in some states as a Superfund site. There was a tiny sign that said that to the effect. It's like, don't eat the dirt, it's poisonous. So that extends all over the place, right? Anytime we're building a new building, how much in the way of fossil fuels are we burning? How much in the way of materials are we bringing in from out of state, out of country, and so on and so forth? This new development on its face is anti-environment. I don't have enough time to say everything, but I'd like to reiterate those comments or reemphasize those comments with regard to the lack of cultural environment. Where does the cultural environment go with these alternatives that you place before us? Thank you.
Thank you. Followed by Tommy Bates.
Good evening, my name is Tim Trapinovich. I'm the Director of Planning and Law for FutureWise. We're a statewide nonprofit organization that works to make cities and towns great places to live and to protect our farms and forests for this and future generations. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the draft DEIS. We will be preparing written comments in more detail. Tonight I want to speak to the preferred alternative. We strongly recommend that the preferred alternative include all areas within a 10-minute walk shed within urban villages. The investments that we have made and are making in transit are very significant and have the potential to reduce greenhouse gas pollution, to increase housing affordability, and to increase people's ability to live in areas where they can easily access jobs. So again, we would recommend that the preferred alternative include all areas within a 10-minute walk shed. And as I said before, we're going to provide more details later, and thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Tim. Tommy Bates, followed by Kim Barnes.
Hi, and I would like to request more time. I've looked through the documents as best I can after work, but feel like we need to extend the time deadline by 2 to 3 months at least. I feel like the EIS needs to look more closely at the impact on each urban village. They're all very different. To be equitable, urban villages receiving significant development need to receive far more attention in an environmental impact statement. I don't think they should all be lumped into one environmental impact statement when they're so different. And the EIS presumes in many places that the change is gradual. It states there'll be moderate impact because the change will be gradual. We see whole blocks going down at the same time. There's no evidence that the change will be gradual. The EIS needs to address directly the pace of this change and how this affects the actual impact on these neighborhoods. The evaluation needs to include a high, medium, and low pace in terms of time. So that it properly reflects what's actually going on. And so long as you have speculative developers out there and the kind of profit margins they're making, you can anticipate that pace will make for a severe impact. Another thing I think is a flaw in the environmental impact statement is it relies on existing codes, ordinances, and procedures to mitigate impacts and protect people of Seattle from the severe impacts. These ordinances are in many cases ineffective, they're antiquated, and they've needed revision for many, many decades, some of them. Tree protection is one example, the noise ordinance is another example. There's also oversights in the EIS. I looked for what the energy impact of focused development like you've got would be. I found only 2 short paragraphs which are listed as mitigation. There wasn't anything on actual impact. The mitigation said we have a program called benchmarking, which is basically an information and documentation program. It's nothing to do with impact. We have energy codes for new construction, and that is what was listed for energy impact, which is like less than 2 paragraphs. There's also other impacts, toxics released when you tear up old houses.
Yeah.
The development next to me will release 15,000 cubic feet of soil that are contaminated with benzene, have to be hauled out. When you do that, and you do that in 3 or 4 buildings along the same block, you've got significant impact due to the synergistic effect of putting all the development in one place.
Thank you, Tanya.
Okay.
James Barnes, followed by Susanna Lynn.
Hi, my name is Kim Barnes, and I live in the Westwood Highland Park Urban Village in Southwest Seattle. I haven't read the entire DEIS. I would request that the comment period be extended to concur with many people in this group. One of the things that I wanted to speak informally about was that reading the alternative 2 and 3 impacts or analysis breakdowns, the thing that immediately struck me is that there seems to be an unintended consequence of pitting high displacement, low access opportunity urban villages against low displacement, high access opportunity urban villages by the way the actual zoning maps are constructed. Alternative 2 wants to put more density in the high displacement, low access opportunities, and alternative 3 actually pushes it onto the low displacement, high access opportunities. So I'd like there to be a consideration for how are we setting up the social discourse between these urban villages that are in the DEIS and how they are weighing up the alternatives for who's going to get the density and who isn't. As a resident of Westwood Highland Park, I can tell you we're on the south margin of the city, and the urban villages that live on the south margin and the north margin, you know, are being proposed in alternative 2 to take high density, but at the same time, we're not getting the infrastructure investment. We haven't had capital investments for 20 years in our area.
Yeah.
So how are we going to take that type of high density when we don't have the sidewalks and also the other infrastructures that we need to be able to deal with that density? So I just wanted to put it out there, those unintended consequences that are arising with alternative 2 and 3. That cannot be resolved. I say we go with alternative 1. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susanna Lynn. I'm speaking on behalf of the Seattle Displacement Coalition. We will be submitting more detailed written statements soon. But today we want to make it very clear how extraordinarily disappointed we are with the lack of quality and the lack of adequate or accurate information contained in the draft environmental impact study. It does not offer a true alternative, just MHA this way or MHA that way. There should be a true alternative to MHA that limits or manages growth. For example, a true alternative, one idea could be you could downzone downtown so the base height was 2 stories. But if a developer wants to build 50 stories, they would have to participate in a voluntary zoning program, and you could require affordable housing be built on site. Developers can't sue if it's voluntary. Based out downzones can be justified by our runway growth and the lack of infrastructure. If you insist on MHA, why not study a 25% affordable housing set aside? Other cities require 10 to 30%. In addition, this document downplays the amount of affordable housing that will be lost.
especially in the supply of unsubsidized, naturally occurring affordable housing. It looks at income according to household income, so that shared rentals such as single-family homes are all ignored in the count of lost affordable units, even though sharing a home can be the cheapest rent available. It fails to adequately measure the effects of upzones and displacement on our growing homeless epidemic. The mitigation strategies are minimal. It should include one for rent replacement and establishing a fund to buy at-risk affordable buildings. Alternative 2 and 3 pit neighborhood against neighborhood. It is not an objective, honest look at the impacts upzones will have on cultural displacement, the unique historical, social, and cultural character of our communities. Thank you.
Chris, followed by Kim England.
It's been said that you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And unfortunately, and also, by the way, you're not entitled to your own process. This process has been warped and basically secret since it was begun, when many of you were signed on to the grand bargain, which was done in secret without any notice or involvement. You know, the deck is stacked, unfortunately, and what we heard earlier about this was not acknowledging that if, you know, it's kind of like a statistician who drowned in a lake that was 3 inches deep on the average. You know, failure is to differentiate the analysis by neighborhoods. And I happen to be from Eastlake. Eastlake is found to have the greatest amount of demolition and one of the 5 neighborhoods that would have the greatest amount of demolition and building. And you know, unfortunately, you have not taken our advice, and it's really what you should be doing is differentiating it. That's the whole idea of neighborhood planning. Neighborhood planning is being basically trumped by this MHA process, and I use that word advisedly.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, neighborhood planning is how it should be done. This EIS is completely the opposite. And if you do look carefully at what is happening in each neighborhood, and it's going to be a very different result. And I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. I mean, you know, and HALA is referring to affordability, but it's not really affordability. It's affordability to people who are at the lowest level of income. The middle class is being devastated in our city, and especially in our neighborhood and a number of the others. And there's nothing in this analysis that really acknowledges that and deals with it. And you know, you have to go back and take another look at it. And finally, in terms of livability, HALA, the L in HALA means livability. There's nothing to improve livability in this. And you know, if anything, the EIS documents this. Start over and make HALA be truly equivalent, and in which affordability is concerned for all people and livability is concerned. But you're ignoring both. Thank you.
I'm Kim England. Can you hear me? Nice. Now I feel like I'm talking to I've always wanted to pretend I was a musician singing on stage, so it's a bit.
Can't quite hear you.
No, I'm just making a snide comment. Which is going to be followed by other snide comments. So my comments are about the analysis, particularly of the census data, but also some of the other sources of data that we use in the document. I feel that the document downplays the displacement effect, particularly for low-income groups. Some of the comments I'm about to make have actually been said by people from particular neighbourhoods, so I think that's quite nice because it will meet some of the bones in the sense that I'm laying out here. I feel like the analysis is, to the extent I was able to look at it, because I didn't feel like I had a lot of time to look at it, did not accurately or adequately break out and study what specifically happened to very low income households in the high growth census tracts. those earning, like say, 30% of the median or 20% of the median, they looked like they were being lumped together with those earning at the 50% of the median level. So this ignores factors that are causing a change specifically in the supply of unsubsidized low-income rentals in high-growth areas, and it doesn't really look at what percent of a low and very low-income household's income would go towards housing, so the sort of housing burden that they would have. I think that one of the issues here is also that the analysis doesn't look at increased speculative activity in high-growth areas, such as the rapid turnover and increased sales, and resale of existing affordable older apartments. And I think an inventory of existing stock and doing a susceptibility to change analysis would be very revealing. A little puzzle why it isn't in here, given that it was something that was done in the new district. I also think that the document downplays the impact of demolitions, renovation and acquisition in causing displacement. And I'm troubled, as the South Park people are, at using the tenant relocation assistance ordinance to do this. There are other data you can use, and I am out. Thank you.
Thank you. Miranda, followed by Tim Gould.
Hi there. I would like to request that we have more time to review this. It's over 800 pages. I'm a working parent. I haven't even had time to see Wonder Woman. I mean, come on. We need more time on this. That's my request. Thank you.
Tim?
Who has seen Wonder Woman?
Hi, my name is Tim Gould. I'm here speaking as a resident in Wallingford. When a lot of people, I'm afraid, would basically like to freeze Seattle after they buy in. And I find that very disturbing because we can't really shut the door and not let other people come here. And one thing that I think this particular analysis needs to look at, not just policies in Seattle, but the greater regional context. Certainly when it comes to transportation, greenhouse gas emissions, and so forth, having denser development in Seattle will ultimately be a lot better than allowing more and more McMansion subdivisions to go up the foothills and Cascades. And then when it comes to looking at the access to opportunity as one of the factors in determining what kind of zoning increases in different neighborhoods, I think we also need to look at what would be possible in the way of citywide investments to increase access to opportunity for those areas that have been identified where it's low. Without improving access to opportunity, I'm not so sure those areas would be as good for having interest.
Thank you, Tim. That's the last name on the list here. Is there anyone else who would like to comment verbally?
Can we go again?
Seeing none.
Is the transcript going to be online?
The transcript will be in the final environmental impact statement, and all the comments you made here tonight are carefully recorded, and each one will be responded to directly.
But it won't be posted online?
Not until the document is the final document published. But it'll be actually a formal part of that document. The other thing is, if anyone filled out a written comment tonight, please make sure you turn it in to city staff. And I just want to remind you that your comments via email or using the online comment form are just as good as your verbal comment and submit those as well.
On those written comments, I was intending to break down like ones on different subjects and sub-subjects into specific separate emails. Is that a good idea? So that they're identifiable as being on this subject, on that subject, or should I?
Really, however you want to do it, I would recommend using the online comment form, which already breaks it down into the different elements in the
Do
environment.
we get a record of that? Do I get a a CC email, because otherwise, if it doesn't show up in the EIS, I can't say I submitted it because I was just submitted it through a web form. Whereas if I send you an email and I CC myself, I've got a record of it, right?
Yeah, I can tell you that we're carefully keeping records of all comments, so there would be a record of it. If you want to, for that reason, submit it by email, that's just fine.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, who's making the call on an extension?
The secret responsible official, who's our director, Sam Seifa, would make that call, and we've heard numerous requests, and at this time, we expect to keep the deadline, but we are listening to those requests and it's being considered.
Thank you.
Can I get my name again?
Oh, that was Deb Barker. So thank you all for being here, lots of really good comments, and we look forward to addressing that.
Can you ask anyone who's willing to provide their statements?
If anyone brought their comments written, if you could provide a copy for us, it would help to make sure that we document it accurately. Thank you.
What's your email? We'll send it to you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Probably what we do is, well, we check it against.